Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born in Essex, England, in 1996. She was the youngest of 3 siblings, with 2 older brothers named Michael and Declan. Grace was friendly, energetic, and loved being with her family. She also had a passion for anything creative and artistic. After going to the University of Lincoln and getting a degree in advertising and marketing, she was ready for a big adventure. She saved money for a year-long trip around the world after graduation. Before leaving, Grace did something kind by cutting her long hair and giving it to children with cancer. In October 2018, she said goodbye to her family and began her journey. The adventurous and outgoing graduate traveled to Peru before spending 6 weeks in South America. She met up with other travelers along the way and was keen to share her journey with everyone back home. On November 19th, 21-year-old Grace arrived in New Zealand alone, and 11 days later, she reached Auckland. She checked into a hostel called the Base Backpackers on Queen Street, sharing a room with some other travelers. Saturday evening, December 1st, 2018, Grace left the hostel just before 6 p.m. and headed out into the city center. Dressed in a knee-length black dress, white shoes, and carrying a small handbag, she had made plans to meet someone she had matched with on Tinder. Initially, Grace didn't seem too sure on meeting up, but after some more talking, her and her date eventually made a plan to get some drinks. Grace met her date at a place called Sky City, an entertainment complex with bars, restaurants, and a casino. Grace had been sending messages to her friend Amina back home, saying, "Lives in a hotel." By all accounts, the evening appeared to be going well. About an hour later, they visited a place called the Blue Stone Room. At one point, Grace got up from the table and the mystery man for some reason picked up her handbag and started searching it. But just after 9:30 p.m., they both left the bar arm in arm and headed down the street. The next day was Sunday, December 2nd, and it was Grace's 22nd birthday. Her family and friends at home were sending messages and reaching out to her over social media, but Grace unusually wasn't responding to anyone, and her 2 phones were going straight to voicemail. Her brother Declan said she had been bombarding them with details and pictures of her trip so far, and no response from her on her birthday was immediately alarming. Grace was a home bird, and this was a red flag. Her parents contacted the Auckland police and reported her as missing on December 5th. Police reached out to the hostel Grace was staying at, and they confirmed that she had not checked back in on the night of December 1st. Initially, the police didn't suspect any foul play. The majority of her belongings were still at her hostel. Maybe she had just stayed with some new friends and forgotten to contact people. Fortunately for detectives, it didn't take long to track down where Grace had been on that Saturday evening, due to the vast amounts of CCTV from around the city. The mystery man she was spotted with that night was quickly identified. The very night Grace was last seen, she had changed her profile picture on Facebook. A comment was posted underneath the picture saying, "Beautiful, very radiant." The person that commented was also the Tinder date seen drinking with Grace. This man was Jesse Kempson, who was currently residing at the City Life Hotel in Auckland. Jesse had written a post prior to the comment which caught more attention. Extracts of the post stated he was sorry for his mistakes, his arrogance, and his selfishness. But who was Jesse Kempson? 26-year-old Jesse was born in Wellington and had moved several times as a child after his parents split up. He had been partially raised by his grandparents and was virtually estranged from a lot of his family. Jesse was described by everyone who knew him as a pathological liar. He claimed everything, from being the cousin of a famous All Blacks rugby player to telling people he was dying of cancer. He lied to employers, landlords, partners, and his family and friends. Time and again, Jesse's fake world caught up with him, and he was frequently evicted from his flats and lost jobs due to his compulsive lying. A former landlord of Jesse said he had claimed to be a professional softball player who had been signed up by New Zealand's national softball team, the Black Sox. He'd lie and say he was waiting on contract money, but after 8 weeks of excuses, the landlord contacted the Black Sox management, and again, Jesse's lies were exposed. He told his landlord at the City Life Hotel that he was a top manager for Woolworths. In reality, his rent was being paid by state benefits. Jesse's last job was in telephone sales. This also ended in a dismissal due to his lies, and this all happened on the very day he met Grace Mullane on December 1st. Jesse was the last known person seen with Grace that night, and police knew he was the man they needed to help fill in the gaps. The same day Grace was reported missing on December 5th, Jesse was asked to come into the station to answer some routine questions. He said nothing out of the ordinary had happened that night. The date had ended nicely with a hug, a kiss on the cheek, and a plan for the following day, before the pair eventually parted ways at around 10 p.m. He said he had tried to message her the next day on Tinder, but noticed that Grace had unmatched him, and that was where his encounters with her abruptly ended. But the officers hadn't yet finished looking through the CCTV from the City Life Hotel, and they were about to start gaining more answers to the remaining questions they had. A sinister and disturbing picture was slowly being put together, and almost 6 terabytes of CCTV data were being analyzed. Despite Jesse saying they parted ways on the street, they were both seen arriving at the City Life Hotel arm in arm. They exited the lift together on Jesse's floor, but Grace was never seen leaving the building. The morning after, on what was Grace's birthday, cameras did pick up Jesse leaving the hotel. They followed him over the coming hours, tracking his every move. He left the hotel in the morning and went shopping to buy a suitcase. He then went to buy some cleaning supplies, and just before noon, he headed over in a taxi to a car rental company and rented a red Toyota Corolla. Several hours later, Jesse met with another woman he had engaged with on Tinder. She later reported that he had some disturbing conversations with her, speaking about burying bodies and his friends that were police officers. His date said he made her feel so uneasy. She declined Jesse's offer to get in his car and made her own way home, never talking to him again. After this, Jesse went out into the city center again, this time to hire a rugged Dr. Carpet cleaning machine, explaining to staff that he had some red wine stains that needed cleaning up. Later on, at 9:30 in the evening, Jesse loaded 2 suitcases onto a hotel trolley and offloaded these into the Toyota he had rented earlier. At around 7 a.m. the next day, he was picked up on camera again, this time buying a shovel, and 2 hours later, he was spotted power washing the car. He then returned the car to the rental company, and it was subsequently rented out by someone else. On the 5th of December, the day Grace was reported missing, Jesse was seen visiting various locations and dumping things in bins. Police arrived at the City Life Hotel looking to talk to him. Just as they reached the front desk, Jesse returned to the hotel himself. The minute he saw the police, he quickly turned around and began walking away, with his head firmly facing the opposite direction. The police clocked him, chased after him, and brought him in for questioning. Despite Jesse denying anything had happened, police still began a thorough search of his hotel room. On December 7th, David, Grace's father, was now in Auckland. He made an emotional plea for help. The investigation was moving quickly, and although police didn't name him, they revealed they had spoken to Jesse and that he was a person of interest. The more time ticked by, the more fearful people became, and the police stated that they had grave concerns for Grace. On December 8th, as more and more evidence was coming to light, Jesse was eventually taken into custody and interviewed again. His story had now drastically changed. Jesse said that when he had awoken the next morning and realized Grace was dead, he went into shock. He panicked and put her body in a suitcase and drove out to bury her. He still denied any guilt, however. The forensic search of Jesse's room added more to the already disturbing story. Despite Jesse's attempts to clean up, Grace's blood covered the floor of the hotel room. Given what Jesse had told them, it didn't take long for police to start searching an area on Scenic Drive near the Waitakere Reservoir. Shortly after 4 p.m. that day, officers found a body around 10 yards from the road. D.I. Scott Beard had been heading the investigation and was working closely with the Mullane family. For him and his team that had been hoping to find Grace safe and well and bring good news to the family, it was clear how much of a painful moment this was for everyone involved in the search. The grief was shared throughout the nation. Thousands of people paid tribute to Grace and held vigils. The New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly apologized to Grace's parents and offered hers and her country's full support. Following this, Jesse Kempson was formally charged with the murder of Grace Mullane. On December 10th, just 5 days after Grace was reported missing, Jesse appeared in court in Auckland. He was granted an interim name suppression to ensure a fair trial, which is why so much of his interview footage was blurred out for a long time. Following an autopsy, a pathologist confirmed that Grace had been strangled and had bruises on her arms and chest, consistent with being pinned down. Considerable force would have been required, and the pressure on her neck must have lasted between 4 and 5 minutes to be enough to kill her. At around 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, as Grace lay dead in his room, Jesse carried out a number of internet searches. Using his phone, he looked up hottest fire, flesh-eating birds, and Waitakere Rangers, the location where he would later try to bury Grace's body. After this, he trawled through a pornography site. He then took several intimate photos of Grace's dead body. Hundreds of people turned out for her funeral at Brentwood Cathedral in Essex. Detective Inspector Scott Beard, who had been looking after the case, flew to England to pay his respects and support the Mullane family. 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, Jesse appeared in the High Court and he pled not guilty. His trial began in November later that year. The trial would last just 3 weeks, and for much of it, Jesse remained stony-faced, showing no emotion. He occasionally glanced down at court papers or held his head in his hands. Jesse's defense team argued that although tragic, Grace's death was that had gone horribly wrong. They claimed that Grace had engaged in sexual encounters like this before meeting Jesse, and this time it had been a tragic case of sexual misadventure. They said that Jesse had simply panicked and attempted to hide Grace's body after he realized the sexual encounter had accidentally taken her life. But the prosecution were already armed with a mountain of strong evidence and witnesses. They argued that Jesse did not panic, and this was not simply something that went wrong. It was very clearly deliberate and intentional. They said that he had calmly and callously set about covering his tracks, creating what they called a labyrinth of storytelling and lies as he went. Despite his protests of innocence, on the 22nd of December 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberations, Jesse Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. Jesse was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. The case prompted many people to express their anger at how Grace's life had been presented during the trial, and how her death had been explained away by her killer, many feeling it was shameful and grotesque victim blaming, rather than placing the blame on the murderer himself. Jesse's family branded him a pathetic fantasist. His stepbrother said he lied over pointless things all the time, and continued to lie until the point where he's got no out, and then he breaks down, cries, and runs away. After he was found guilty of murdering Grace in the highly publicized trial, Jesse faced a further 2 trials the following year. These were judge-alone trials, and no jury was present. 2 women had gone to the police when they had seen the blurred images of Jesse after he was arrested for Grace's murder. They knew instantly it was him, and they both had horrific stories to tell the officers about Jesse. In the first of these 2 trials in October 2020, an ex-partner spoke of the physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse she had suffered while with him, and drained her account of $10,000. Jesse was found guilty of 8 charges and jailed for 7.5 years. In November 2020, he was put on trial again, this time for raping a young British tourist he had met on Tinder, 8 months before he had murdered Grace Millane. He forced himself on her and said, "If you don't do this, I will kill you, and I will kill your family, and you know I will." He was then found guilty and given another 3.5 years in jail for this crime. This brought the total to an additional 11 years, which will run concurrently alongside the sentence he received for the murder of Grace. When Justice Jeffrey Venning found him guilty of rape, it prompted an aggressive outburst from Jesse. Tragically, in November 2020, Grace's dad David Mullane passed away after a battle with cancer. In December 2020, the name suppression concealing Jesse's identity finally lapsed, when the Supreme Court denied his last-ditch appeal against his sentence in Grace's murder. It is alleged that Jesse is working on appeals in both of the sentences for the 2020 trials as well. To honor Grace's memory, her family and friends raised a record amount of money for the White Ribbon Campaign. The White Ribbon Campaign is a charity looking to end male violence against women, by engaging with men and boys to make a stand against violence and challenge behaviors. Grace's family and friends raised over £11,000 in her name. The Love Grace campaign was also set up in Grace's honor. The campaign asks for donations of handbags filled with essential items to help provide support for women seeking refuge from harmful and abusive relationships. I've left links to these and a few more resources in the description box below. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. Before we proceed, I've got an exciting surprise for you. We've launched a brand new channel dedicated to intriguing content such as old historical mysteries, cold cases, and particularly chilling horror stories perfect for bedtime. Drop a comment letting us know if you're a fan of horror stories or not. You can find the link in the description below. Let's find out who will be the first to explore it. Alright, let's dive back into the video. In 2006, Lori and Charles Vallow seemed to have a great life. Lori married Charles Vallow, who was a businessman, and they looked happy together. They were raising Tylee Ryan, Lori's daughter from before. But behind the scenes, Lori had some problems in her past that people didn't know about at first. Lori Ryan Daybell, also known as Lori Vallow Daybell, was born Lori Noreen Cox on June 26, 1973, in San Bernardino, California. When she was 19, she married her high school boyfriend, Nelson Yanes, but they got divorced soon after. Then, when she was 22, she married William Lagjoya, who was 23, in Travis County, Texas, on October 22, 1995. They had a son named Colby in 1996, before divorcing on February 25, 1998. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan Jr., who legally adopted Colby. The couple's biological daughter, Tylee, was born in 2002. Ryan filed for divorce on August 13, 2004, which was finalized on May 18, 2005. And here's where things started to become weird and sinister. In 2007, Ryan was attacked by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who claimed Ryan had been abusive to Lori and the children. Cox tasered Ryan and threatened to murder him. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 90 days in jail, which he served in Austin, Texas. But that didn't stop Lori from playing the same trick again of using her brother to get rid of an inconvenient husband. On February 24, 2006, Lori married Leland Anthony Vallow, commonly known as Charles Vallow, in Las Vegas, Nevada. A lifelong Catholic, became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, converting to his new wife's faith. Vallow had two sons from a previous marriage, Nicholas and Zachary Chase. In 2013, Lori and Charles Vallow adopted J.J. Vallow. He was the grandson of Charles's sister. J.J. had autism, and April Raymond, who was Lori's friend, says Lori was patient, an ideal mother for him. Veja Itate Howe met the Vallow family when they lived in Arizona. She says Tylee embraced her role as a big sister, and that Tylee even jokingly referred to JJ as her own child. Sometime around 2017, relatives say Lori's relationship with her children changed. Her friends say she had been reading the books of Doomsday author Chad Daybell. Daybell, who wrote several fiction books about preparing for the end of the world, lived outside Rexburg, Idaho.
In 2018, Lori Vallow met Chad Daybell.
Lori's friends say there was a connection between the two and they began doing religious podcasts together. Daybell was also married. Together with his wife, Tammy Daybell, he was raising 5 children. But what kind of man was Chad Daybell really? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968 in Provo, Utah. He married Tamara, Tammy Douglas, in Manta, Utah on March 9, 1990. He graduated from Brigham Young University in 1992 with a BA in journalism and worked as a cemetery sexton or gravedigger among other jobs. In 2004, Chad founded Spring Creek Book Company, which he used to self-publish his end times fiction and other religious books. His partner in this venture was a man identified in the media only by the name Douglas, a graphic artist and manager. Chad and Tammy's 5 children were named Garth, Emma, Seth, Leah, and Mark. In 2005, Chad claimed he heard a voice telling him to relocate to Rexburg, Idaho. He and Tammy moved there from Springville, Utah that June. Around 2015, Lori read Chad Daybell's Standing in Holy Places series of books, reportedly becoming obsessed with them. In 2016, the Vallow family moved back to Arizona. In the fall of 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie Gibb preparing a people event where Lori was introduced to Chad for the first time. According to Gibb, by the end of the weekend, Chad told Lori the two had been married in 7 previous lifetimes. The two soon began communicating privately. Several weeks after their initial meeting, Lori's husband left town on a business trip and Lori held an intimate overnight gathering at her home. In attendance were both Gibb and Chad, who was speaking at another conference in Mesa, Arizona. Gibb later recalled Chad lavishing attention on Lori and expounding upon his unusual religious beliefs and the deeper mysteries of God with a small group of the overnight guests. According to Gibb, Chad stated he had lived 31 different lives on various Earth-like planets. He referred to others as light or dark and various gradations in between. Chad believed the dark individuals were from this earth but were followers of Satan. Those who were light were followers of Jesus Christ. Chad Daybell referred to Lori as an eternal being of 21 separate lives, only 5 of which had occurred on this planet, the same 5 he had lived on this planet. Lori was both thrilled and attracted to this belief system and became increasingly fixated on this newfound purpose and on Chad. On December 5, 2018, Chad and Lori appeared together on the Preparing the People podcast Time to Warrior Up. Chad later stayed at the Vallow residence in Arizona. By February 2019, according to Charles Vallow, Lori was informing him that she no longer cared about him or JJ and claimed that she was the reincarnated wife of LDS founder Joseph Smith, then vanished for 58 days. Lori's friend Melanie Gibb would later say she heard Chad and Lori talking about zombies, people whose souls were replaced by dark spirits. Lori's former friend, April Raymond, told 48 Hours that Lori started referring to her husband, Charles Vallow, as a demon. In 2019, Charles Vallow became very worried about Lori, and he went to the police with his concerns. He told them Lori believed she was a god preparing for the end of days. Charles also said Lori had threatened to murder him. On January 31, 2019, Charles Vallow was seen on police body cam video telling officers his wife had become unhinged. The same month, Charles filed for divorce, stating that his wife had threatened to murder him, taken $35,000 from their joint bank accounts, and stolen his truck. He filed for an order of protection against Lori at the advice of his attorney, citing a genuine fear for his life. In July 2019, Charles Vallow went to the house where Lori Vallow was living with the children in Chandler, Arizona. Charles was supposed to drop their son JJ off at school, but when he went inside the home, Charles was shot dead by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Cox told police that Lori and Charles got into a fight. Alex claimed he was protecting his sister and shot Charles in self-defense. Lori and Ty Lee, who both say they heard the shooting, told similar stories of self-defense. After Charles's death, his attorney stated he had been primarily concerned for JJ's safety and well-being, as he needed a constant routine due to his special needs. Charles had also been concerned for Ty Lee, but he was unable to include her in the filings as she was not his biological daughter, and thus he had no legal standing. He withdrew the petition 1 month later, saying he wanted to try to make the marriage work. Unfortunately, it ended up getting him killed instead. Around September 2019, Lori Vallow moved closer to Chad Daybell. She relocated her kids to Rexburg, Idaho. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, moved into the same apartment complex. JJ Vallow, Tylee Ryan, and their uncle Alex Cox were at Yellowstone National Park on September 8, 2019. Police say this is the last known photo of Tylee before she disappeared. Now we know that Melanie Gibb has said by this point that Lori had referred to Tylee as a zombie. The morning after Tylee Ryan disappeared, investigators say that Alex Cox's cell phone GPS placed him in Chad Daybell's backyard, on the property for about 2 hours. About 14 minutes after Cox's GPS showed him leaving the property, Chad Daybell texted his wife, Tammy Daybell. The text read, "I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery." There is a photo of JJ wearing red pajamas taken on September 22, 2019, in what is believed to be the last known photo of the 7-year-old. The police have also confirmed this. Melanie Gibb says that she and her boyfriend, David Warnick, were staying with Lori in Rexburg that weekend. On the night of September 22, 2019, Warnick says he saw Alex Cox carry JJ into Lori's apartment. Lori reportedly told them that JJ was being a zombie and that Cox had to take him away. On September 23, 2019, the day after JJ was last seen, investigators say Alex Cox's cell phone showed that Cox returned to Chad Daybell's backyard. This time, Cox was only there for 17 minutes. On September 24, 2019, Lori contacted the school to let them know that she was withdrawing on October 9, 2019. Tammy reported on her Facebook profile and to police that she had been shot at, in her driveway, by a masked man with what she believed was a defective paintball marker. The county sheriff's office did not find the perpetrator. 10 days later, Tammy was found dead in her home, purportedly of natural causes. Chad claimed that she had retired the night before with a terrible cough and died in her sleep. Said Tammy died in bed and that he and Chad called 911. The Daybell children declined an autopsy. They say the coroner told them Tammy's death appeared to be from natural causes. They believe that because they said their mom was in ill health prior to her death. It was just so heartbreaking. My father needs someone to be a voice for him, to let people know what's real, what we know. So basically, Lori, Chad, and Alex managed to fool both sets of families into thinking that these simultaneous disappearances and deaths around the same time were all just a huge coincidence. But then the real motive emerged. Roughly 2 weeks later, on November 5, 2019, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell got married on a beach in Hawaii. There they told others that Tylee had died in 2017 and or that Lori had no minor children. Kay Woodcock asked the police to check on JJ's welfare. Woodcock said she was concerned and hadn't heard from JJ in months. On November 26, 2019, Rexburg police went to Lori's house looking for JJ. Police say Lori lied to them, claiming that JJ was safe and staying in Arizona with her friend, Melanie Gibb. At first, Gibb wasn't forthcoming about JJ's whereabouts, but later called the police and told them JJ hadn't been with her. While Rexburg police attempted to locate JJ, investigators soon realized that his sister, Tylee Ryan, was also missing and launched a nationwide search for the children. Colby and JJ's grandparents pleaded with the Daybells to return the children, with the latter offering a reward of $20,000, equivalent to $20,941 in 2021. The children are not with Chad and Lori. Lori knows where they are or what has happened to them, but she has completely refused to assist this investigation, choosing instead to leave the state with her new husband. While investigators searched for the missing children, Lori traveled back to Hawaii with her fifth husband in a series, Chad Daybell. Through their lawyer, the Daybell stated that Chad Daybell was a loving husband, and he has the support of his children in this matter. Lori Daybell is a devoted mother, and she resents assertions to the contrary. We look forward to addressing the allegations once they have moved beyond speculation and rumor. In December 2019, Fremont County Sheriff's investigators grew suspicious about Tammy Daybell's death. They exhumed her body to conduct an autopsy. The same month, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, died in Arizona. It was determined he died of natural causes. Cox, who had changed his surname to Pastines, the surname of his wife, died on December 12, 2019. His death was attributed to blood clots and high blood pressure. On January 25, 2020, authorities served Lori Vallow with an order requiring her to produce her children. After failing to comply, Lori was arrested in Hawaii on February 20, 2020. 2 weeks later, she was extradited to Idaho. In an interview with KSL, Annie Cushing, who is Tylee's late father's sister, said Lori had become obsessed with the end of the world and often talked about driving off the edge of a cliff with the children. Even after Lori's arrest, the couple refused to say where the children were. On June 9, 2020, the FBI, Rexburg Police, and Fremont County Sheriff's Office descended upon Chad Daybell's home and property. Authorities dug in areas of the backyard where Alex Cox's cell phone had pinged in September 2019. Tragically, they uncovered human remains buried in shallow graves. JJ Vallow had been buried under a tree about 50 yards away. Investigators found Tylee's grave in the Daybell's pet cemetery. Prosecutors believe she was buried in the same location Chad Daybell referenced when he texted Tammy Daybell 9 months earlier, saying he was burying a raccoon. Investigators dug up part of the pet cemetery and found no raccoon. But Daybell's family said that there was a second pet cemetery on the property that was not searched. Chad Daybell was arrested. Authorities later confirmed that they identified the remains as J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. A memorial was built along the Daybell's fence to honor the victims in June 2020. In May 2021, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell were charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of J.J. and Tylee. Daybell was also charged with murdering his first wife, Tammy Daybell. In June 2021, Chad Daybell pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. Also in June 2021, Lori Vallow Daybell was charged with conspiring to murder Charles Vallow. That same month, a judge ruled Lori incompetent to stand trial while she received mental health treatment. She had not yet entered a plea. Her case was on hold. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty against Chad Daybell. Daybell was jailed, awaiting trial. In September 2021, Chad and Tammy's children, speaking publicly for the first time together, told 48 Hours they believe their father is innocent. Daybell's daughter, Emma Murray, said she believes Chad was framed by Alex Cox and Lori Vallow Daybell. On April 11, 2022, Judge Stephen Boyce ruled that Lori Vallow Daybell was now mentally competent to stand trial in the Idaho murder case. He did not provide other details about her treatment or mental condition. She was scheduled to be formally arraigned in court next week, and both Lori and Chad Daybell were set to stand trial together early next year. On April 19, 2022, Lori refused to enter a plea to murder and other charges, prompting Judge Stephen Boyce to enter a not guilty plea on her behalf. Lori and Chad were both at the courthouse in the eastern Idaho town of St. Anthony for court proceedings. Lori Daybell for an arraignment that was delayed for months while she underwent treatment at a mental health facility, and Chad Daybell for a hearing over the trial venue. Lori Vallow Daybell would qualify for capital punishment if she is convicted at her trial because the slayings were exceptionally depraved and carried out for financial gain according to court documents filed by prosecuting attorneys. From Fremont and Madison counties on May 2, 2022. On May 25, 2021, Chad and Lori were indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the deaths of Tylee and JJ and Tammy. The trial has since been postponed until early 2023 in the hope that Lori is able to be deemed mentally competent by that time. There are a number of odd details and inconsistencies about Lori's story that failed to add up and finally led to her arrest. Despite her insanity plea, the more you find out about her behavior throughout, the more you'll realize that this was a woman who was fully in control of her actions, fully aware that she was committing a series of terrible crimes, and fully capable of constructing a cover-up to get away with it. For example, when in November 2019, police questioned her about the children's whereabouts and welfare, Lori and her new husband, Chad Daybell, claimed that JJ was staying with family friend Melanie Gibb in Arizona, where they had lived before moving to Idaho in early September 2019. But when police reached Gibb by phone, she told police that Joshua was not with her and had not been there for several months. More than a week later, Gibb called the police, saying that both Lori and Chad had asked her to lie to the police about JJ's whereabouts, but she refused. Police efforts to locate JJ led to the discovery that Tylee was also missing. And obviously, complicating the circumstances around the disappearances was a string of suspicious deaths. Not only was Lori's estranged husband, Charles Vallow, shot and killed by her brother, Alex Cox, who claimed self-defense, but that same brother just so happened to die of a blood clot later on. How convenient for Lori that Alex didn't live long enough to explain to a jury why he had this habit of violently attacking his sister's husbands. Another factor contributing to the mystery was Chad and Lori's well-documented obsession with certain apocalyptic beliefs, which Chad had discussed in numerous books and podcasts. Melanie Boudreau, Lori's niece, reportedly shares these beliefs. Add to this that in early October 2019, Brandon Boudreau, the then estranged husband of Lori's niece, Melanie, was shot at in the driveway of his Gilbert, Arizona home from a vehicle still registered to the deceased Charles Vallow. Can this possibly be an unrelated coincidence? And then, of course, in October 2019, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, was attacked in her driveway by what she believed was someone shooting a defective paintball gun. A few weeks later, on October 19th, she died in her sleep, from what was initially recorded as natural causes. No post-mortem or autopsy was initially performed. It has also been reported that a wedding ring was purchased on Amazon from the deceased Charles's account for $35.99 on October 2nd, 2019, 17 days before the death of Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell. And finally, in a stunning blow to the insanity plea mounted by the defense lawyers, authorities confirmed that they had soon turned their attention to a Rexburg storage locker rented by Lori in October 2019. Inside, they discovered items belonging to or associated with Haley and JJ, such as clothing, bikes, and photographs, all of which had been abandoned when Lori suddenly left Rexburg at the end of November 2019. There was even video footage which shows her and her brother Alex Cox moving items in and out of the locker prior to her departure. All of this to be explained away by the defendant Lori Vallow on the grounds of her religious beliefs? Hardly. On March 24, 2020, NBC News reported on documents showing that Chad and Lori became convinced that Tylee and JJ were possessed and had become zombies. But was that really the whole truth and nothing but the truth? That there is also a financial motive here. Because later on, Lori was also charged with grand theft related to Social Security survivor benefits over $1,000 allocated for the care of minors, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, that were appropriated after the children were missing and ultimately found deceased. And Chad? He was charged with insurance fraud related to a life insurance policy he had on Tammy Daybell, for which he was the beneficiary and received funds after her death. Unfortunately for themselves, this perfectly matched killer couple forgot that getting rid of their respective spouses and children wouldn't be enough for them to collect some extra cash and live happily ever after. Lori's 2 children and grandparents who loved them, and Chad's wife had children who loved her. Between them, these other family members finally found a way to avenge the death of their loved ones. And Lori and Chad are headed to maximum security prisons and will be separated from each other for the rest of their lives. So much for true love for these truly heinous killers. So, what do you guys think about this insanely twisted and evil pair of killers? This story is still developing, of course, so as new and even creepier details emerge almost weekly, we won't get a full picture of the case until Lori and Chad face a full jury. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. On Mother's Day, May 9th, 2021, in St. Johns County, Florida, 13-year-old Tristan Bailey was reported missing by her parents at 10 a.m. They had last seen her around midnight. Tristan was described as a sweet and enthusiastic 7th grader. She was a budding cheerleader, known for being cheerful, spirited, and friendly. Her coach praised her for bringing the team together and motivating them. Tristan attended Patriot Oaks Academy, which has about 1,500 students. Around 2 p.m., the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office officially announced that they were searching for Tristan. Later that day, a Florida missing child alert was issued. This alert is issued when a child is missing and believed to be in life-threatening danger, but with no indication that the child has been abducted. Police were issued via various media outlets, and the community and police began an extensive search to find her. Tragically, after just 16 hours of searching, the body of Tristan Bailey was found by a resident that had been out looking for her that day. She was located on the south end of a retention pond just east to the cul-de-sac of Saddleston Drive. She had been stabbed to death with 114 wounds on her body, 49 of which were defensive. Authorities also later found a book knife, which is a folding knife often used in hunting. This is believed to be the murder weapon, and it was discovered in a pond nearby. The knife was missing the tip, which was found snapped off inside Tristan's head. The community have been an incredible source of ongoing support since the news of Tristan's disappearance and later tragic death broke. The Bailey family said they have felt such encouragement and love from so many. Many people in the community turned over home CCTV footage to the police in a bid to help. And some of this footage had in fact picked Tristan up early that morning. In the early hours of Sunday morning, Tristan was spotted at 1:15 a.m. at the North Amenity Center in Durban Crossing, and half an hour later she was seen again on Saddleston Drive, just over a mile away. On both pieces of footage, she was seen walking with someone. At this point, the case was now moving rapidly, and on May 10th, just before noon, it was announced that the police had made an arrest. 14-year-old Aiden Fucci was also a student of Patriot Oaks Academy, and he had grown up in the same neighborhood as Tristan. The teen was then charged with second-degree murder. According to the arrest report, a neighbor's CCTV camera showed the pair walking together along Saddleston Drive at 1:45 a.m. The drive is surrounded by a wooded area, and as you reach the end of the drive, there is a dead end which leads directly into the wooded area. This location is very close to where Tristan's body was found. The report says one subject was wearing what appeared to be shorts, a light-colored hooded sweatshirt, and white shoes with a black Nike logo. This description matches Aiden Fucci. The second subject, known to be Tristan, was wearing black pants and a black shirt, although it was initially reported that she had been wearing her cheerleading outfit. The arrest report said that the person matching Aiden's description was then seen walking away from the wooded area at around 3:27 a.m., heading back down Saddleston Drive. He was carrying a pair of white shoes, which we now know to be his, in his hand. He later said he took them off because his feet were hurting. When he was spotted walking back down Saddleston Drive, this was almost 2 hours after he had been seen with Tristan on the same road. Following this sighting, police went to Aiden's house to question him on May 9th, just a day before he was arrested. His house is located approximately 0.3 miles from the location Tristan's body was found in. Police put him in the back of the car, and while he was in the back, he posted a disturbing picture to Snapchat. He captioned the photo, "A search warrant for Aiden's house led to the finding of multiple items of evidentiary value." The forensics team worked around the clock examining these items to try and obtain any DNA. This process can sometimes take months, but the teams at the lab tested everything rapidly, and subsequently, Tristan's DNA was found on a pair of shoes and a t-shirt that were both located in Aiden's bedroom. According to an affidavit, the defendant, Aiden, said he had been at a mutual friend's house that night with Tristan before leaving. They had then engaged in an argument at around 1:10 a.m. before he pushed her to the ground where she hit her head. But the details of this alleged argument are unconfirmed, and it remains unclear as to how the pair came to be walking together down the street. On May 11th, Aiden appeared via Zoom in Volusia County Regional Detention Center in front of Circuit Judge Michael Orfinger for a detention hearing. His parents, Kristen and Jason, were present, as was his lawyer, Anwar Snobber. Judge Orfinger ordered his stay in juvenile detention for 21 days, until the state attorney made their decision on whether he would be tried as an adult or not. A week later, Jacksonville attorney Anwar Snobber, who had been retained to represent Aiden, filed a motion to withdraw from counsel. This was granted. Aiden's parents both asked for a judge to declare them indigent. Indigency means someone doesn't have sufficient income to afford a lawyer for defense in a criminal case. Aiden's mother's application was accepted, but his father's was initially denied. After explaining that he was self-employed and since everything had happened he was unable to find work, his request was also granted. This means that the 14-year-old will now be represented by the Public Defender's Office. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition asking the state attorney's office and Governor Ron DeSantis to charge Aiden Fucci as an adult rather than a juvenile, and also to charge him with first-degree murder as opposed to second-degree. On May 18th, a celebration of life was held to honor Tristan Bailey. People attended the memorial at Celebration Church in Jacksonville wearing aqua and white, which were Tristan's favorite colors. It was extremely emotional and moving, and the family and friends of Tristan shared beautiful memories and positive and hopeful thoughts and feelings. Everyone showed such tremendous strength, resilience, and grace, and it was clear to see what a close bond they all had. On May 27th, it was announced that Aiden Fucci would in fact be tried as an adult, and his charge was also upgraded from second-degree murder to first-degree premeditated murder. He was indicted unanimously by a grand jury on first-degree murder charges. Here is what we know about what it means for Aiden to be tried as an adult as opposed to a juvenile. If he was charged as a juvenile, It means he cannot legally be held in jail beyond the age of 21. Adult charges automatically attach to a first-degree murder indictment. So when the grand jury indicted Aiden of first-degree murder charges on May 27th, his case automatically moved out of the juvenile court and into adult felony court. In his first court appearance since it was announced he would be tried as an adult, Judge Howard M. Maltz laid out the charges he is facing. Judge Maltz said, "His first-degree premeditated murder charge is a capital felony that is punishable by life in prison or the death penalty. But because Aiden is under the age of 18, the death penalty is automatically off the table." In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court found the death penalty unconstitutional for defendants who were under the age of 18 at the time of their crime. If convicted of first-degree murder, Aiden could receive a maximum sentence of life in prison. Florida technically has parole, but courts haven't granted it for some time. The Florida legislature abolished it for most crimes in 1983, and it was phased out for the remaining crimes by 1995. However, Florida law does require a judge to review the life sentence of a juvenile 25 years after their arrest. At the point of the review, the judge can consider a number of factors in deciding whether to change a life sentence or not. These factors can include whether the victim's family objects, or if the defendant still poses a risk to society. Regardless of what happens at that 25-year review, a juvenile convicted of murder in Florida must serve a statutory minimum sentence of 40 years behind bars. The state attorney, R.J. Laritza, indicated that his office will be seeking life in prison, but said Aiden will likely be able to appeal it as part of a wider, ongoing effort to reduce sentences for juveniles in Florida. If he were to receive a life in prison sentence, he will be eligible for a review of his sentence at age 25 because he is currently a minor at this time. All of these outcomes completely depend on whether or not Aiden changes his plea and what happens in the coming weeks and months. Police said there is no evidence at this time to suggest that Aiden suffers from any psychological conditions or issues, and he has no previous criminal history. The motive for this senseless and horrific attack at this point remains unknown. However, authorities allege that Aiden told people in the days before Tristan's murder that he was planning to kill someone within the month. He didn't say who, but he spoke of plans to take someone into the woods and stab them. So far, authorities have refused to disclose whether the murder was sexually motivated, and according to records, so far, there is no indication of sexual assault. What they can confirm, however, is that they found Aiden's DNA on Tristan's body, but what that DNA is, again, is unconfirmed. There are also some people on social media who have published posts suggesting they were part of the crime too, or have said they knew other people may have been involved. These accounts and statements have been investigated by officers and will most likely continue to be investigated. But the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office said the accounts and people they had looked into had nothing to do with the murder. The Sheriff's Office says at this time there are no other suspects in the crime apart from Aiden, but they are investigating the possibility that someone could have been involved as an accessory after the fact. A felony arraignment date was set for June 10th. This is where Aiden would plead guilty or not guilty. But on June 3rd, Aiden Fucci's attorney entered a written plea on Aiden's behalf. This was a plea of not guilty. It has also been reported that since he is now being tried as an adult, he is being held without bond at Duval County Jail in Jacksonville. Although there is space for juveniles there, he is being separated from the adult inmates inside. On June 5th, it was reported that Aiden's mother, Crystal, is now facing a charge of tampering with evidence after she turned herself in to authorities. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. In the southern part of Minnesota lies its largest city, Minneapolis. Together with St. Paul to the east, they make up the Twin Cities metropolitan area. About a 6-hour drive from Chicago, Minneapolis is known for its cultural diversity, scenic parkway system, and harsh winters. Despite its reputation for safety, it proved dangerous for our victim, Jean Childs. Jean and, born in 1958 to Eugene and Betty Ekman in Asante, Minnesota, was known affectionately as Jeannie to her loving family. However, Jean's life took a difficult turn when her stepfather was tragically shot by her uncle, who happened to be her stepfather's business partner, in 1971. Nothing was normal after his untimely demise. Jean dropped out of school in 6th grade and ran away from home numerous times. Although she came back each time after just a few days, she moved out of her mother's house when she reached her late teenage years. Soon she developed a drug addiction, and to pay for the drugs she entered into sex work. After moving to Minneapolis from her hometown of Isanti, Jean married Alfred Childs. She too fell in love with him. After a hysterectomy, she was not able to conceive children, but she left no stone unturned to be a loving and caring stepmother to Alfred's 3 children from his prior relationships. However, the marriage fell apart after some time, and Jean seemed to return to her previous profession. After the separation from Alfred, she started dating a guy named Arthur Gray. In 1993, they were living in an apartment unit on the 21st floor of Horn Towers on Pillsbury Avenue in Minneapolis, which was leased to Arthur. Allegedly, this was the unit that Jean used for her sex services, and Arthur was her pimp. Everything seemed normal for Arthur and Jean until 1993. On June 13, 1993, a neighbor in their apartment called the police and told them about a water leakage mixed with blood in his residence. The police immediately reached the spot, and upon inspection, they determined that the blood was coming from an adjacent apartment, which was Arthur and Jean's apartment. So as the police entered, a bloody crime scene was waiting for them. Inside the apartment, the floor was full of water mixed with blood. The bedroom window was open and the screen was missing. The shower was unoccupied, yet left running. Investigators soon found Jean's dead body wedged between the bed and the dresser, wearing nothing but socks. She had multiple stab wounds all over her body. Blood was splattered on the walls of the bedroom, living room, and even the bathroom. This indicated that the attack was prolonged and that the attacker perhaps chased Jean all over her apartment before brutally murdering her. There was no shortage of blood evidence. Several items were taken to the lab for DNA testing, including the bedding, a towel, a washcloth, a red t-shirt, and a blood-soaked comforter. And interestingly, while all the other items had only blood on them, the comforter had semen on it along with blood. However, the most appalling evidence for the investigators was a bloody footprint left at the crime scene near the dead body. After the crime scene examination, the body was taken to the medical examiner's office to perform an autopsy. The autopsy revealed Jean had a total of 65 stab wounds across her neck, chest, abdomen, back, hands, arms, and buttocks. It was almost everywhere on her body. The vicious attack did not even stop with this poor woman's death, as many of the one wound was so forcefully imposed that it went right through her heart, exposing her internal organs. Despite having a bucket full of genetic evidence, the investigation wasn't moving anywhere. An unidentified male profile was made from the DNA collected from the crime scene, but when they ran the criminal database, no match was found. Due to her profession, Jean used to let strangers come into her apartment every now and then, which made it impossible for the investigators to line up suspects. No witnesses ever came forward with information. Unfortunately, this case garnered little to no media attention. Without having any solid leads, this case quickly went cold and stayed so until 2015. All the while, Jean's family mourned her loss and hoped that one day justice would be served. Jean's mother Betty always kept in close contact with investigators regarding the case. With a tag of horribly difficult to crack in the DNA evidence sitting in storage, this case remained one of the most brutal cases in Minneapolis. The cruelty was never in question. The question was, who did it? In order to provide answers to the family in 2015, the case was reopened in light of new DNA technology advances. In all these years, DNA technology has changed with unbelievable developments, one of them being DNA genealogy, aka tracking family trees that are generated through public profiles. This is a powerful tool that has proved to be priceless to law enforcement in solving cold cases. Although the case was reopened in 2015, it took 3 more years to discover the truth. Following the DNA trail finally led the investigators to the suspect, a Minneapolis resident named Jerry Westrom. Authorities revealed that they obtained the data from a public profile where either Westrom or a close family member of his submitted the DNA to learn more about the family members. When the police looked into the profile, Jerry Westrom was a businessman from Isanti, Minnesota. He ran a 92-acre organic farm in Cambridge in Isanti County. He was a married man with 3 children. Formerly, he owned a pair of gas stations and a Sears appliance store. Though he was a resident of Isanti from April 1991 to December 1993, he lived in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. At the time of Jean's murder, he was a 27-year-old man residing near her apartment. Although back in 1993, Westrum's DNA was not in the criminal database. He was no stranger to the law in the latter part of his life. In 2004, he was convicted of the misdemeanor of carrying a pistol without a permit in Isanti County and driving while impaired. He was sentenced to 90 days for the former charge and 6 months for the latter charge. In 2011, he was convicted of driving while impaired with a sentence of 1 year, which he did not fully serve. Again, in 2012, he was convicted of driving while impaired. In 2015, he was convicted of a misdemeanor for attempting to hire or engage in sex work in a public place in Stearns County, Minnesota, for which he was sentenced to 20 days in jail. In 2018, detectives had a suspect in their sights thanks to genetic genealogy testing, but they still needed more evidence to officially charge Westrum. In order to obtain a DNA sample from Westrum without his knowledge, detectives began to tail him. They got their chance when Westrum discarded a used napkin after eating a hot dog while he was accompanying his daughter to a hockey match. The DNA was taken from the napkin and sent to the lab for DNA testing. When the results came back, it was a match for Jean Killer's DNA left at the crime scene. So he was arrested in February 2019. On February 14, 2019, Jerry Westrum was charged with second-degree murder and the 1993 stabbing of Jean Childs. The next day, he posted bail of $500,000. Then, on June 25, 2020, he was indicted for first-degree premeditated murder for the same crime. 1 month later, on July 24, 2020, he pleaded not guilty to the charges. Westrum's trial began in August 2022. The defense claimed that they had the wrong man. They also pointed out the other suspect, Jean's other boyfriend, Arthur Gray. Arthur did have a reputation for being abusive, and some of his hair was also found in the victim's hand. However, after so many years have passed, Arthur is now dead. Regardless of that, the prosecution called a friend of Arthur's who testified that they were on an out-of-town motorcycle event during the murder of Jean. The prosecutors also argued that not only was Westrum's DNA matched with the attacker's DNA, but also his footprint was completely matched with the bloody footprint left at the crime scene. This evidence puts Westrum right where the murder occurred as Jean's assailant. It was also argued that the attack was moved from room to room and he had plenty of time to stop, but he did not. That he showed he really intended to murder. Westrum's family supported him throughout the court proceedings and trial. In a document, his wife said the family was forced to liquidate all assets and sell a century-old family farm to pay for his bail and defense. After just 2 hours of deliberation, a jury found Jerry Westrum guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree intentional murder of Jean and Childs on August 25, 2022. On September 9, 2022, Hennepin County District Judge Juan Oyo sentenced 56-year-old Jerry Westrum to life in prison. He will be required to serve 30 years before the possibility of parole. Family and loved ones talked about how wonderful Jean was and the lasting impact her murder left on their lives. Jean's mother, Betty Eekman, who never lost hope, said in court, "I never thought for 1 second that it would be the last time I would talk to her and say goodbye. I've waited so many years to have this end. This has put my life through so much hell." Jean's niece, Melissa and Bolo, who was just a child in '93, said, "I remember the knot in my stomach. I was crying so hard that I couldn't breathe. And I remember her laying in her casket and we were begging her, 'Please wake up.'" Jean's sister Cindy Kosnich had a statement read into the court record. "My children have grown up never knowing their Aunt Jean. I am so sorry that we never got to say goodbye. Your death has forever changed our lives." Amber Childs has fond memories of her stepmother Jean. "She was barely 4 years old when Jean passed away. I do remember she tucked me in when I was a little girl," she said. "She was like a mom to me, obviously. She was my mother once upon a time." Alfred Childs, now 84, expressed his thoughts by saying, "It took me to the twilight zone. It was really something else. Nothing was right after that. everything was gone. Only the DNA technology made it possible to apprehend the monster who was behind this heinous act. After 30 years of waiting, Jean's family finally got justice. But this case makes us wonder how many killers are roaming around us with a good citizen's mask. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.